Welcome back to Problematic Women. I'm Virginia Allen. We are so glad to have you here on the show where it is not wrong to be right. And joining us today, we have back in studio.
Yes. Hi, I'm Morgan. Super excited to be back this week for this conversation.
Yeah, well, we have a very special guest joining us once again, Alison Cheperdak. She is an etiquette expert and has a brand new book out that we are going to dig into. But Alison, welcome back to Problematic Women.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, this is quite the celebration. This gorgeous book. I've been admiring the cover. We've been talking about it. It's striking. The yellow, the pink. Was it something I said? I absolutely love that title because I think we all have a little bit of social anxiety when you're walking into a party or you just wind up in the kitchen at work with someone that you don't really know that well and you're trying to conduct small talk. And these are all issues that you touch on in this book. So let's kind of start with the big picture. What drove you? What inspired you to write? Was it something I said?
Well, I've always loved reading and writing, and I had been posting on social media for quite some time and had developed a community of people that were asking lots of questions like the ones you just described. And I wanted to provide a resource that people could turn to that would be really helpful. Social media is wonderful, but it's not as organized in our archival sense as what a book can be with an index that's alphabetized and easy to access. So I wanted to make it easy for people to access etiquette information and answers that they were looking for. And I also wanted it to be really accessible because I teach at a lot of private companies and universities and places throughout the government, but this is something that anyone can find at their local bookstore or wherever books are sold.
Okay, so you said alphabetized. I've been curious personally, what is kind of the flow of the book? Like, what can readers expect to get out of it? Just like, can they flip it open to any page and learn something? Is it a chronological book? Like, what are we getting into?
Thank you for that question. So it's written so that you could read it cover to cover if you wanted to, but there's also an index so that you can flip to exactly the page that has the answer that you're looking for. So it's either or. Like if you have a job interview or a funeral or you're not sure what black tie or cocktail attire really means, you can flip to exactly those sections or you can read it the whole way through. And the way I've structured it is each chapter starts with a personal story or anecdote. So it's narrative because I didn't want it to be just like information that you could easily look up. And so exactly, I wanted to make it personal and more memorable in that way. So I share like some funny stories or some mistakes that I've made so you don't have to make them too. And then I'll share my suggestions in the most clear terms that I can. And then I answer questions that are related to the subject matter. So I get lots of questions on social media that I answer in my Ask Alison column in ED Magazine or on my Substack. And this is like an extension of that, answering more of the questions that I've received.
We love ED Magazine. It's phenomenal. But actually, I do have a question off of something you just said. What is black tie optional?
Black tie optional. So it is a dress code that I wish didn't exist. And the reason is because it's so ambiguous.
So ambiguous.
It usually, I find, is used when the host wants to say black tie, but they don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable if they don't have a tux or if they don't have a gown. So it's a way of seeming more accommodating or inclusive. Another time that I see black tie optional happening is that maybe the host knows that if you are requesting a certain dress code, you are also informing the guest the style of formality that they can expect or the level of service. And so if you are asking people to dress in black tie, it shouldn't be a cocktail party. It should be a seated meal and it should be a nice meal. And so there's an element of that. So black tie optional could work if you want people to get dressed up, but maybe you're not able to provide the seated meal experience or the formal seated meal experience. But in general, clarity is kind, whether we're talking about dress codes or anything else. When you say something like black tie optional, guests are left wondering what you think. What I like better is black tie preferred or black tie invited. Sometimes I see that because that makes it clear. Like if you don't have a tux, I'm not requiring you're not going to be told that you can't come into the wedding reception. But we would like folks to wear a tux if they're open to.
Okay, so you've mentioned a variety of topics like funeral, jobs, but in the title, was it something I said? For me, I was like, is this about conversating? So is it more advice in like a bunch of different scenarios or how to have conversations in those scenarios? That's something I'm curious
It's all of the above. So it's about everyday etiquette to avoid awkward moments in your relationships, work, and life. And so we talk about like those things like meeting your significant other's family at Thanksgiving or having small talk or things that come up in work, like how do you have executive presence and what does that look like as a woman? This book isn't only for women, but I think it will really resonate with women. And then there's a lot just about like how you move about the world, or even like how to show respect in various houses of worship that may be different from your own. So that's a helpful guide as well if you're someone that finds yourself in that type of scenario.
What do you think are some of the biggest faux pas, or maybe just kind of simple mistakes that people make specifically in the day-to-day conversation of, greeting someone at church or at work, just as you're moving through life at a happy hour, where maybe you would say, a lot of people make this mistake and there's such an easy way to fix it.
A lot of people are not present enough in conversations. So the biggest thing you can do to be more kind, be more compassionate, is to give people the gift of your attention when you're talking to them. Listen to them actively, make eye contact, nod your head. If people can see your hands, you come across as more trustworthy and more accessible. It comes back to a very, yes, it's because it shows that we come in peace. Like there was once a time when people walked around with weapons, and if you couldn't see people's hands, like it's the same reason why the French, their dining etiquette is such that people keep their hands rested at the table. It shows that you're not having any weapons beneath the table. So that's what that's all about. But another thing is listening to the other person and not being so focused on what you're going to say next. And I see that especially with folks who have a lot of social anxiety. So they're focused on scripts or memorizing just the right thing to say. And instead of listening to what the other person is saying and allowing themselves to let their creativity flow and let that inspire their next question, they get too stuck on what they're going to say next, and the conversation becomes really disjointed.
Definitely have experienced that.
No,
I have been guilty of that many a time.
I feel like even in like the DC circle where everything feels so networking, it's like, what do you do for work? Like, who do you work for?
Yes.
What kind of like practical advice do you have, maybe in the book or outside of the book, that a lot of young Americans can take in instead of asking those types of questions to present that, active listening and maybe ask something different?
Thank you for that question. To begin, let's talk about why what do you do is not the greatest question in the world. Some people ask it because they're really curious and they don't realize that it can come across as, who do you know, how can you help me, or even how much money do you make? And what you definitely don't want to do is you don't want the answer to the what do you do question to then end the conversation, because then it comes across like, now that I know what you do, I'm no longer interested in pursuing this relationship or this conversation. Instead, you can ask more general questions about how they've been spending their time, what they enjoy, what brings them here, how they know the host, things like that. But then once someone starts to talk about their work, then they've opened the door and it's fair game to talk about. But until they've done that, it's best to let them tell you first. If someone ever asks you what you do, I recommend, if you're not looking to share, keep it more general. So like I was on a local TV station yesterday, and somebody asked me about that, how they don't really love being asked, what do you do? And I said, you don't need to say that I'm a TV news reporter for this particular station. You can say, I work in media. And it's also accurate, but it may not lead to the same line of questioning that it would if you were to answer with specificity.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I want to walk through maybe a scenario that I think a lot of us find ourselves in sometimes. So let's say you're attending a birthday party for a good friend, but the friend has invited lots of other friends and you don't know anyone else in the room except the birthday girl. And she's obviously in high demand for conversation. You're not going to be able to talk to her the whole time. You wind up in a conversation with two other women who maybe they know each other, you don't know them. What is maybe one or two questions that you would ask in that scenario?
I would start with, how do you know the birthday girl, and maybe sharing happy memories of how you know each other. It can be fun, like maybe if they're a childhood friend and you're someone who met them in graduate school, it might be fun to trade stories and things like that. So I would start there, and you make a great point that it's your duty as a good guest to get to know more than just the people that you know. Because when a host is putting together a guest list, they're not thinking like, well, all of my church friends will talk in this corner and all of my work friends will talk in this corner. Like, the goal here is that people will mix and mingle and that they'll enjoy getting to know each other. So try to do that and know that you don't need to talk to the same person that you began talking with at the beginning of the party for the rest of the party.
Ooh, how do you get out when it's like, oh, I have nothing more to say?
So a graceful exit starts with being really present in the conversation. So pay attention, have that positive body language, the eye contact, the talking with your hands that we talked about, and then punctuate it. So you don't need to talk forever. What you don't want to do is you don't want to lie. So don't say that I'm running to the restroom or I'm going to get something to drink and I intend to be right back if that's really not your intention. Instead say, it's been so lovely chatting with you. I loved hearing about, your friends' childhood growing up or your fond memories in college. I hope you enjoy the rest of the party. If you are going to follow up in some capacity, like let's say you talked about a book or a podcast or something that you are going to send to them, say it if you're actually going to do it. But don't say, I'd love to get coffee sometime or we should get together if you really don't mean it. And that's another one that people say those kinds of things because they think that it sounds kind. But if you're someone that tells everybody, like, let's get coffee sometime and you really have no intention of following through, then it makes it seem like you're a little flaky or that you don't manage your calendar very well. And we don't need to get coffee with every single person. Like imagine if exactly. Imagine what that would be like. So just say it's been so lovely getting together. I hope you enjoy the rest of the party. If you can introduce people to others, that can be a nice way so that you're not leaving someone with no one else to talk to. Yeah. Especially because sometimes other people may not be as comfortable mingling in a party, so they kind of want to stick to you. I think we've all experienced that sometimes, but that's okay. And if you ever can introduce other people, that's wonderful. I'm a big, big proponent of introducing yourself and others at parties because that's something that doesn't happen enough.
Yeah. I know you spent a lot of time writing this book very methodically, coming up with all the different chapters and segments. What was your favorite part to write, if you have a favorite portion? And even like in etiquette, there's so many like business etiquette, social etiquette, hosting etiquette. What is your favorite as well kind of etiquette to talk about?
Well, my favorite parts to write were about 3 of my girlfriends who all live in Washington, who have been work friends and now life friends. I've, been in their weddings and all these things. But one of them, when I don't want to give everything away, but, but when I was working in the West Wing, it was during COVID and, when there were when most people were not going to the office and I didn't feel safe taking the metro at all hours of the night. And I had this one friend who lived on Capitol Hill at the time, and I would text her as soon as the president's schedule came out on the days that he was on the book, because I was in the office where it was our responsibility to deliver the president's daily briefings to the residents. And you never knew when the schedule was going to be ready. There was really no rhyme or reason to it. And so I would text her, and in the time that she would drive over, I would print off the president's schedule on the most beautiful embossed paper that I will ever be allowed to touch. And she did that every single day, like no questions asked. And I talk about her in the context of friendship. I talk about another girlfriend of mine who had a really challenging loss. And not that I'm the hero here, but I use it as an example of how to help someone who's grieving. And she went through something really hard, and she wanted her community, her closest friends, to know what happened, but she didn't necessarily want to be the one to tell them. And so I use it as an example of how you can get support, and in specific ways, and in one of them being that you can have someone share your hard news rather than having to relive it every time. But not that I'm happy that she went through that at all, but I'm happy to be able to share the stories of people that I love and tie it back to etiquette and kindness, because it's not just about, like, if you want to know what an oyster fork looks like, you can find that in the book.
But you're not most passionate about the oyster
No,
forks.
I'm not. And like all of that is in there, but it's all ultimately about kindness and respect and integrity and leading a life with compassion where you see the dignity in every human person, including yourself. And so it's those personal stories that help bring it home for me.
I like that. I feel like it really makes your book different from a lot of other etiquette pocket books and things where, you can just flip to a page and see what an oyster fork is or how to set a table or, what good manners looks like. But having that personal connection and giving those examples, I think, will be very relatable. And for a lot of women, regardless of their age, whether they're high school or moms or grandmothers who just want to learn something new. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it really kind of bridges the gap between moving etiquette from, oh, this is something I should know when I go to a fancy dinner, to, no, this is a lifestyle. And this is how I can embody etiquette for my friends and my family. But you mentioned working in the White House. Would love it if you would share a little bit of your own journey and story, because you have done many different things in your career and lived a lot of life. But what was your journey into this area and this very unique space, especially in the modern age, of etiquette and of teaching others? How do we live this out on a day-to-day basis?
Thank you for that question. So I had no intention of teaching etiquette or even letting people know how much I knew about etiquette because I didn't want people to feel uncomfortable, long before this. Exactly. Like
your best kept secret, really.
It kind of was. And one of my friends who I write about, she's actually interviewing me for one of my book tour stops, and which will be nice because she was the first person. She noticed that we followed some of the same etiquette accounts on Instagram. And so that was when we first talked about it. And at the time we were both working at the U.S. Treasury, and she asked me if I would ever consider teaching it. And I just thought, like, no, I don't want to make someone feel uncomfortable because I know what fork should be used. But she opened my eyes to the fact that I could share it in a really winsome, like, big sister energy kind of way. And my passion started when my husband and I were engaged to be married. We were 22. I hadn't been to many weddings before. I grew up in the Northeast, oldest grandchild on one side of the family. And I had all these questions. So my mom recommended I get the Amy Vanderbilt Complete Book of Etiquette. And
good.
Yes, so good. Continues to be so good. And I thought I would just turn to the pages that would tell me if all of my cousins get a +1 or how I address this invitation. And then I found myself reading that first book cover to cover. And at the time I was working as a television news reporter and anchor. And then I went to law school and I was practicing law and I was working first at a law firm and then in the government. And all along I kept seeing that these soft skills are super powerful. And I also saw in DC specifically, DC is a place where not everyone, but most people are not from here. And it's a very self-made, relationship-driven town. And I would see things like an intern would come in and ask to go to a press briefing in the James Brady press briefing room. And I would think, you don't know that doesn't land well the way that you're asking this. And that's something that I write about, like how to show up well, how to advocate for yourself, how to express your interest in certain positions or certain opportunities. And there's a lot of soft skills that people were never taught. And so I try with zero mean girl energy to teach that a little bit and share my thoughts and some of my experience.
I definitely have seen, I feel like you've stepped into that role of, mentorship and being a mentor to a lot of young women. I'm sure some men also pick up tips here and there. But I recently saw you went to the West Wing again, and this time not working in the West Wing, but actually hosting a class for staffers. Tell us a little bit about how that went, why DC, White House etiquette, how that's a little bit different than just normal business etiquette.
Yes.
And I just thought that was really fascinating and a cool opportunity. I know the Conservatoire kind of posted about that, and you did it yourself. But just what an amazing kind of full circle moment I'm sure that was for you.
Thank you. So I worked in the Trump administration in the first administration, and then I launched this etiquette business, and then President Trump is reelected, and I've actually been teaching etiquette as part of the White House internship program since the beginning of the second administration, but I waited to share it until now because I was trying not to distract from my messaging, because even though I recognize that what I share resonates with a lot of people who are right of center politically, I don't believe that etiquette is political at all. It's about 100%. It's about kindness. It's about integrity. And if any president of any political persuasion asked me to teach etiquette at the White House, I would say yes.
Of course.
And so I have been teaching there for a while as part of their orientation program, and now felt like the right time to share with my book coming out in a matter of days. And you asked about how things are different at the White House versus other places. So everyone everywhere is deserving of respect, whether you are the managing partner at a law firm or you're the receptionist. But there's a special kind of hierarchy at the White House. Also, when you're an intern, it's a temporary role. A lot of those people go on to be full-time employees at the White House or other parts of the administration. And while I did not intern and I was a full-time employee, I do think that there is a steep learning curve, and it's a lot to take in really quickly. And I have a lot of respect for the way the White House internship program really prepares people and launches them into really successful careers. I have so many friends. I know we have some mutual friends that have interned in administration's past that are doing so well now.
No, it's definitely like a great step in the right direction. I'm glad you're in those rooms too, because DC kind of is a very special melting pot, like you said, of just like everyone feels like a transplant, coming together, different cultures, different states, like no matter where they're coming from. So being able to just like educate from, I guess, just like a normal view of like, this is kind of how to present yourself in a room. This is how to have conversations with your superiors, because a lot of that I don't feel like is common knowledge until you get here.
Yes. And I think just things like, how do you introduce yourself? How do you introduce others? Asking for informational coffees, being deferential, like there's a lot to navigate.
For sure.
Give us maybe 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you tell those interns that's practical things.
A lot of them are interested in developing mentorship relationships. And so we talk about that. And something that I share is that you want to be really specific with your ask. You want to be kind, specific, and deferential. So what I say is that instead of saying, I'd love to pick your brain, or could we get coffee sometime, you should make it very clear why you're reaching out to this person specifically. So you're not going through every single person in the White House or every single person in Washington and sending out some like blast spam email. You are specifically targeting them because you respect their work, or you have some mutual connection, something like that. And then share exactly what you want to talk about. Because if someone is busy and they want to be helpful and they want to be impactful, if you give them an idea of what you're looking for, like you're thinking of studying foreign affairs or going to law school or working in a particular office or going on Capitol Hill or going to K Street, whatever it is, if you have some bullet point questions, that person receiving your email can think, that's easy. I don't need to prepare for this. I can answer these questions off the top of my head. So they're more likely to say yes. And then you want to be deferential because maybe they can go for coffee with you, or maybe it's easier for them to respond to your email right now and they'll get coffee with you another time. So be deferential and accepting of what their bandwidth looks like in terms of how they're able to connect with you at this time. And then another thing we talk about is not forcing things. Like, for example, if you need a letter of recommendation for something, it's better to have someone who is really excited to write that letter than someone who says, yeah, I'll write the letter. Why don't you write it and then I'll sign it for you? Or someone where you feel like you're twisting their arm to do you a favor. So we talk about some of the strategy as well as the etiquette and the professional approach to take.
How do you respond on the other end of that? Because Morgan and I were both talking about how you are incredibly busy, you have a lot of demands, and I'm sure you've received lots of those emails.
Requests.
Yes.
Like, hey, I would love to get coffee.
Yes.
And you're thinking, I would love to, but I don't have time. How, when you're maybe a little further on in your career, how do you respond with grace when literally you don't have time?
No, maybe the most graceful answer.
Yeah.
I will say, and maybe this will resonate with some folks who've been in Washington for some time, like if you went to a certain school, you might be like the star alumni of that school, and you get a lot of similar requests. So it can be helpful to have some notes, some bullet points, some things that you can copy and paste. Just like if everyone is asking you for recommendations to Italy because you've been there, you can send the same recommendations for Italy to everyone who asks. So it can be helpful to have some information readily available that you can quickly email. If you're a more outward-facing person, a public persona, if you have information that's out there for others to access, you can send them that as well. I definitely talk with the interns or just with young people in general about you want to do your homework. You should not be asking questions that can be easily gathered on someone's Wikipedia page. You should not be asking for a private one-on-one for something that they have talked about on a podcast.
Yeah. That's good advice, because I'm sure like you live a very busy life. You're traveling to New York. You're about to have your entire book tour. You are teaching classes. You're speaking. I mean, I don't know how you keep your calendar structured, but what would you say like is, because I guess in my head it's like having good etiquette also means having good personal life and taking care of and having your calendar very regulated.
Yes.
How does that translate for you?
Sometimes it looks like saying thank you for your patience when it takes a little bit of time to respond to things. And also trying to be consistent, and sometimes it means confirming receipt. Like there are a few requests that I've received recently that I've confirmed receipt of, but I won't take care of for some time, and I just let them know, like, you know, it's going to be a few weeks, but then I'll get back to you. So that's something that you can do as well. I often get questions asking people how long, and this happens all the time. Like I was at a military spouses luncheon, I was at a university last week, and I got the same questions around how long is too long to wait to respond to a text message. And I don't think there's a hard and fast rule or a cutoff, but the more you can confirm receipt if you need extended amounts of time, the better.
Yeah, that's fine.
When I was growing up, I remember hearing like the power of saying no. Like it's
Yes,
okay to say no.
definitely.
I want to know your take on that, whether it is, you know, loose plans, coffee, going out, a social event, like whatever that is.
Yes.
How do you respectfully say no to people? Or you just say it.
You can just say it. You can just say it. Clarity is kind. So you can say, I'm in a season where I'm not able to get together for coffee right now. I'd love to get together. Or you can even say, like, would a phone call would that work for your schedule? Something like that. And if someone is demanding a coffee or they're not being flexible in the frequency or the ways that you're getting together, that's more of a red flag, in my opinion, because the best relationships and genuine relationships that endure various seasons, they have this beautiful elasticity to them.
They're fluid.
Exactly. And, but I say that with the acknowledgement that one of the most common questions that I receive privately on social media is from women who feel like they've been ghosted by a friend, or that a friend is drifting apart and they don't understand why, and they think it might have been something that they've done and they want some sort of closure. And I often think that friend very likely might be going through something that has nothing to do with them, but there's this reaction that people think that it's them and they want to know why.
It's a very common reaction, I feel like, right now in society, too, of just thinking, what is it that I've done? Why isn't this person responding to my text in an hour or in 30 minutes even? Because we live in such a digitized world where you were sending videos to each other. And you said there really isn't like a respectful time, but something that I've kind of thought of is like, if you see the text and you acknowledge it in your head, then you have enough time to do a quick response, even if it's like, I can get back to you later. What are your thoughts on that?
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay.
Good rule of thumb.
Yeah, I think everybody's different. Like,
Yeah.
and maybe you find this. I find that my friends who work in sales or like jobs that are very reaction forward, they tend to not be as bothered by being on their phones. Whereas like some people, like my author friends who are, you know, more academic and pedantic, like they want to be like, you know, cloistered and without any notifications. And so we're not all the same, but
It's just healthy to recognize.
yes.
Yeah. Well, and I love this conversation because so much of it is, I think, breaking down a little bit of the wall that I think I have even had with etiquette of thinking it's very outward and public, and it doesn't come as much into the personal relationships. But you do a good job of addressing this. And Morgan and I were chatting. We would love to know, even like, how does this come in with like the most personal conversations, even your relationship with your husband, with your spouse, to where etiquette actually influences those
Your home
relationships that we kind of think of as being more, obviously they are more casual than meeting
Yes.
someone in a business sense.
Yes.
But there's still elements of etiquette that have a role there.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that question because I find that that's the area where we might be most vulnerable to not being our best, because you're not going to be short, most likely, with the person who's getting your tea at the cafe or something. But our loved ones can get like what's left of us rather than the best of us, and we can take them for granted because they're with us through everything. And etiquette is not about being perfect, and it's not about being performative, but you do want to be the best you can for the people that you love the most. And sometimes there's so many things that we could say about this, but choosing your moments when you talk about difficult things, choosing your words really carefully is really important. And then I often hear from people who, especially women that care a lot about chivalry, like they wish that their husband would not wear a hat and would open the door, or they grew up in a family where it's like, all my brothers do this, why does my husband not do it too? And it can be difficult if the wife is coming across as like a disciplinary mother in teaching their husband how to eat a proper meal and things like that. But if you communicate it at the right time, so not in a attacking kind of way, but if you communicate it like this is like a love language for me. It's like a subset of a love language, and I feel really respected when, then it comes across less like you do everything wrong and I do everything right, but more like I feel really loved when you do that.
The switch.
Exactly. And then another conversation to be had is sometimes I hear from people who they're concerned that their significant other like doesn't know how to eat a meal in a way like it's distracting, and they're concerned about like they're traveling for work and they're having all these dinners with their colleagues and their clients, and or they're interviewing for a job where a social component will be part of it. And there can be some concerns there. And for that, I say you always want to communicate like you're on the same team. And etiquette is not about showing off. Like the best etiquette is not noticed. So that's something to think about too.
Yeah, I love that.
That's great advice, especially for like so many of our viewers and even myself, married and in relationships. And like just, I feel like a lot of times women are the ones who are consuming a lot of the information, and like how do you relay certain information, whether it's like communicating meals and whatnot to your spouse. That's some very sound advice.
Well, Alison, please tell us where we can follow all of your work, keep up with what you're doing, and even for folks who are local, if they want to, like, what are the opportunities to book a session with you or have you for a party to share?
Thank you.
All the things.
So my book, Was It Something I Said, comes out on March 17th, Tuesday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, which hopefully will be a very lucky day.
Yes.
And I have a book tour, so I'm starting in Washington and then going to New York, Boston, Palm Beach, Richmond, Virginia, back to DC, Connecticut, New Hampshire. So doing a lot of events, 12 events in 15 days, partnering, partnering with Love Shack Fancy. So going to a bunch of their stores for book signings, and then also MM LaFleur. And you can find all this information on my website at elevateetiquette.com/book. You can find the book everywhere books are sold. And I also read the audiobook myself. So for podcast listeners who like to listen to books,
so fun.
You can listen to that as well. And
that's quite the undertaking.
How long did it take you to record the entire book?
It took me 3 days, and I've never done anything that required so much intense attention for such a prolonged amount of time. But I will say I felt so appreciative for the team that I had. They were really great, and
awesome.
Hopefully everyone likes it. I've listened to the little preview because you can do that on Audible and Spotify, and so you can listen if you want to get a sneak peek. And
do you think you'll be able to listen to your own audiobook?
I don't know if I can handle it for 8.5 hours, but we'll see.
I have a hard time going back and listening to the podcast.
No, me too.
I would be in that same boat. Like, yeah. Very fair. Well, the book is Was It Something I Said? It is out on St. Patrick's Day, so be sure to pick up a copy and follow Alison across all social media platforms. And we want to share briefly our question of the week. So last week we asked you all, we haven't gotten a chance this week to talk about news, as we often do on this show. There's still a lot of news and a lot happening in the world, including the continued U.S. and Israeli joint operation in Iran. And last week we had an excellent conversation talking about Iran and what's going on there and why the U.S. launched that operation and whether or not it was America first. Or is America first. So if you missed that conversation, go back and check it out. But this week we asked you all, or last week rather, do you support the operation in Iran, Operation Fury? And so 71% of you said yes, outright. Only 7% said no, which I was interested by. And then 22% said yes, but only if it lasts for a month or less. So by and large, most of you all are in support of the president's actions. But this week, I thought it would be so fun if you all sounded off and share your thoughts for our question of the week. What are some questions that you love to ask in those social settings, whether it be a happy hour or a birthday party, but what are some of your go-to icebreaker questions that go beyond how are you and what did you do this weekend? Or, hey, the weather's crazy, isn't it? So please leave us your thoughts on the Problematic Women Instagram. You can find it there. Make sure you also hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on brand new shows. But Alison, thank you again for being here today. This is so fun.
Thank you. I really appreciate you both.
Well, we're excited to continue watching you flourish, watching your business flourish as you teach us all how to be a little bit more sensitive to others and really to live with kindness. So thank you.